Welcome to the next installment of the DIY audiobook of What is Intuition? Resonance, Connection, and Trusting Intuition on its Own Terms. This is Chapter 6, Pillar 2, Awareness. The intuitive mode begs us to stop viewing our world through the metaphor of mechanism. Our world is made up of living systems, vibrating interactions. It's more space than solid and more dynamic than static. The universe, multiverse really, is comprised of infinite sources of conscious potential energy that coheres and dissolves in various configurations and relations. And in intuitive moments, we can capture some of that potential as informational content. That's how intuition makes sense on its own terms. As we move on from cultivating the state of mind that supports us being intuitive, how do we integrate this understanding? In Pillar 2, we get our body and attention on board to anchor in the receptive state most likely to facilitate intuitive awareness. We learn to tune into the body, both physical and energetic, experiencing that these carry and hold information. We practice cultivating a flow state that is more aware of both outer and inner contexts, especially inner, since that needs more practice. We attend to the practical work that lets us get to know intuition on its own terms, cultivating receptive awareness, developing sensitivity, and paying attention to the embodied expression of intuitive experience. In the intuitive mode, we know something by aligning or resonating with the thing being known. And so all intuitive practice begins with aligning to ourselves. In this pillar, we teach ourselves and allow ourselves to become more sensitive and attentive to vibes, energetic, emotional, etc., and tune our consciousness to experience more of what there is to experience. This is where we practice paying attention to our thoughts, emotions, cravings, and other signals of all kinds from the body. This intentional practice helps us inhabit a sense of intuitive connection beyond or outside of thought. With practice, we develop a feedback loop of listening and paying attention, tuning in to notice what there is to notice, and then noticing even more. Here, we're challenged to recognize that our minds, bodies, and spirits are interconnected with everything else in ways that we don't usually recognize, both in the sense that we don't typically pay attention to it and that we don't often acknowledge as real. We integrate the idea that individual consciousness is an aspect of collective or universal consciousness, the prima materia of life. And we get to experience that interconnection through the body and its various organs of perception beyond the five ordinary senses. To get started, let's review some key concepts. Intuition is inner directed awareness. It's unmediated perception and apprehension, taking in sensory awareness or figuring something out. It's sudden recognition. Intuition engages us directly with realms of consciousness that we don't always attend to consciously. So, in this pillar of cultivating intuition, we focus our attention towards letting in more content, specifically from unseen dimensions. The fact of intuitive experience reveals that we are ultimately much more connected than our daily experiences let on, or that our rational analytic culture admits. The brain filters information simply because there would otherwise be too much input. With intention and practice, we can change how and how much we pay attention. We can shift the lens we use to perceive so that different kinds of information filter through. We can perceive in the non-physical realm. Thoughts, ideas, vibes, moods, and affect are all around. It's possible to perceive energy itself. Just as my intuitive sense was heightened after becoming attuned to Reiki energy, when our energetic field is more coherent, we can be both receptive and self-contained. Through a path of practice based in cultivating self-awareness and mindfulness, we can learn to perceive, interpret, and then act on intuitive experience. What we do and don't perceive, see, or notice is framed by many factors, including mindset, what we expect to exist, and our unique sensory capabilities. By practicing a stance of attention and an openness to noticing, we make new perception possible. In Pillar 2, we exercise those capabilities, practicing and playing with the limits of what we make ourselves available for. Paying attention. Pillar 2 is all about cultivating awareness. Paying attention to non-discursive experience like intuition is a skill we can cultivate through meditation and other mind-body practices where we focus directly, usually on the breath, instead of focusing on the constant stream of thoughts, ideas, and concepts that typically run through our awareness. This work helps us to heighten awareness of the inner experiences we typically let slip by. Practices of mindful attention and awareness help us pay more attention in general. They reduce stress, distractions, and the limiting interference of the logical mind, which tends to play the role of censor in the psyche. And it's easier to pay attention inward when the mind is quiet. The practices for cultivating intuition draw us into deeper connection and into a greater awareness of that connection. We become aware and then aware of our awareness. With that awareness of awareness, we begin to perceive more intuitive content and recognize a greater depth and breadth of interconnectedness. Although it seems simple to advise that intuition is enhanced by paying attention, this is an important and transformative piece of advice that is driven by mindset, attitude, and belief about what we can experience. To put it bluntly, if you don't believe you can be intuitive, you will not let yourself be aware of intuitive input, information, or awareness. The mindset pillar has helped us become more aware of the metaphysical choices we make all the time. Now, we continue to enlarge the lens with which we perceive, judge, and filter experience. This work is a reclamation of psychic freedom, designed to make us more aware of an unseen connection that is already there. We bring that awareness closer to the fore, working to integrate the mind, body, and spiritual realms. If this sounds simple, know that it can be deceptively difficult. For one thing, most of us are out of practice, having been taught and encouraged to not do this kind of introspective critical work. In fact, we're mostly oriented in the wrong direction. Rather than tune in, we learn to tune out. It can be really uncomfortable to examine ourselves as we are and to inquire about how we've come to be that way. Some of this is painful and some just cringy. Many of us spend every waking minute studiously avoiding relating to ourselves with this much attention. The impulse to avoid looking inward and paying attention to the simple experience of being is strong and is reinforced by our culture. Yet that is what intuition development requires. We need to prioritize introspective and contemplative practice and learn to trust that these practices can generate knowledge and expanded awareness. The mindset pillar helps us change our thoughts, but changing our actual perception, that takes further practice. We have to get ourselves into the receptive mode and then play around in there. We need to expand our expectations of how intuitive experience can show up, because often it's not in our thoughts, but in our bodies. And sometimes it's not even in the body. We're just presented with intuitive content, a sudden awareness, a spontaneous image or thought. There is a lot we can pay attention to. And while I'm definitely not advocating for hypervigilance, I am suggesting that we open to the opportunity for intuitive experience by deepening and widening our scope of attention. You see, attention exists on a spectrum. We make assumptions about what there is to notice based on our perspective, identity, cultural imprints, and other filters. Through intuition development, we also cultivate awareness of and learn to pay attention to what is going on outside and around us, our context, relationships, connections, and the world at large, including both the seen and unseen dimensions. To correct an imbalance, we pay particular attention inward to our embodied experience, including thoughts, emotions, feelings, and responses. When we do start to pay more attention, we might find that our contexts are more complex than we are normally aware of. We need boundaries around our attention. That's a role of consciousness. These keep us sane, but our boundaries themselves need to be examined regularly, lest they become too rigid. If we boundary too hard, intuition can't break through. Intuitive experience is best served by a dispersed quality of consciousness, meaning that you can't look too hard. Remember, focusing is a limiting practice. It's like looking at the sky during a meteor shower. If you focus on any one star or even any one area of the sky, you're likely to miss a shooting star. But when you defocus and gaze out at the sky as a whole, you're far more likely to catch a glimpse of the moving meteors. Instead of looking too hard, we cultivate a receptivity that is oriented to potential and possibility. In this way, the practice of intuition development works to entrain our awareness so we can be in this receptive state more often. The balance point is like the state of relaxed attention brought about in contemplative states. We might call this an inner state of surrender. Practices for awareness. Developing receptive awareness requires us to pay attention to the following: attention to self. There are so many things to notice about ourselves, especially with a holistic idea of what the self entails: mind, body, spirit, and interactive conscious engagement. We develop awareness of our embodied experiences and our tells. This can start with paying attention to cues like hunger and thirst, even bathroom cues. Inner self awareness. We map previous intuitive experience to create a blueprint for what it feels like for us. We notice the tendencies and habits of our mind and stay curious about thoughts, fears, inner censorship, and things we ignore or pretend about ourselves. Outer self awareness. We pay attention to our environment and the interactions taking place within it, seen and unseen, including energetic aspects, shifts, and clues in the environment. We develop our sensory capabilities, including extrasensory ones, and let our attention take in a wider range of input. Interpersonal and relational context. We learn to notice our empathic intuition. We feel into others' vibes, moods, and emotions, and we identify our emotional tells. Holistic context. We attend to the transpersonal and unseen features of experience. We develop energy sensitivity and notice resonance in the subtle body through vibes and coherence with energies that hold information. We expand our heart's capacity as an organ of perception. Flow state. Most of us become aware of intuitive experience when it spontaneously arises to a consciousness that is otherwise occupied, when our attention is not tightly focused, but diffuse. Consciousness is more receptive to intuition in moments when we're doing something else, like when we're caught up in ordinary everyday tasks. These spontaneous scenarios are described in creativity literature as the bed, bath, bus phenomenon, the locations where such insights often occur. These are moments when inspiration hits because we are calmly distracted, relaxed, and engaged in the flow of doing something else. You've had those sudden aha moments of intense clarity in the shower, right? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. A relaxed yet attentive state of awareness can give rise to the optimal experience of flow, which is known to support intuition and other aha moments, where all of a sudden there is coherence. Everything, or just something, makes sense. Flow is a state in which we are completely immersed in our experience. Think of athletes during a game or musicians when they lose themselves in performance. We can intentionally cultivate such clear-headed moments. When we pause to specifically relax the mind from a problem we've been working on, a receptive state generally arises. This is a strategy sometimes called incubation, letting the problem gestate while we carry on. We can support incubation by getting up and doing something else, taking a walk, cooking or baking, doodling, journaling, or anything else that distracts the thinking mind so the rest of our consciousness can relax and activate a creative response. Although it might seem counterintuitive in the context of a high stress lifestyle, we can enable flow by scheduling in some unstructured time in the day to relax the intellect and become more open to receptive awareness. Coherence. We are most intuitive and in tune when our brains, bodies, and hearts are coherent, vibrating on the same wavelength. So, in general, cultivating awareness is a process of becoming increasingly coherent by surrendering to the dynamic flux of our experience. Centering, grounding, and clarifying boundaries are the foundations of this work. Coherence is facilitated by mental, physical, and emotional well being, as it's easier to receive or perceive subtle experience when we're balanced and at ease. When we are coherent in this sense, the nervous system, the immune system, the cardiovascular system, and the hormonal system are all working together in harmony. These factors support intuitive knowing by allowing us to experience increased energetic flow, facilitating communication and interaction between the mind, body, and spirit. In a coherent state, energy is used efficiently. Psychologically, we feel less tension and more flow in our experience, facilitating the relaxed, receptive awareness in which intuition arises more easily. We become more aware of and open to the energy around us, creating space for intuitive hits. There are many techniques and behaviors that help cultivate coherence and that open the subtle body, facilitate experiences of flow, and support resonance. A whole range of mind body practices exist for this, regulating the nervous system, smoothing the aura, and cultivating inner resources, inner fire. Cross-culturally, practices for restoring balance include mindful movement, purification techniques, cultivating silence and stillness, prayer, invocation, setting intentions, making offerings, sacrifice, and expressing gratitude. I recommend taking up whichever of these practices resonates to become more centered and grounded as you set out on the path of cultivating intuitive awareness. Sensory and extrasensory perception. So many intuitive experiences get discounted as something other than intuition. Say you always get the same uncanny feeling at a certain person's house or in a particular shop. We might discount it, saying, yeah, I felt that, but I always feel that here, not registering that that's intuitive information. Often, as a matter of cultural training and habit, we overlook the intuitive in the everyday and then only register the more intense, strange, or otherworldly intuitive experiences. This tendency is not only a profound disservice to our intuitive nature, but also detaches us from paying attention to the subtle experiences in life, making our awareness duller and less connected. Cultivating intuition includes developing progressively more subtle perception. Some vibes, for example, certain ranges of light and sound waves, are perceptible by the usual five senses, while others are sensible in different ways. We know that the five senses don't cover all we can experience, and that human perception extends beyond these senses. That's why we sort of recognize ESP as a sixth sense, lumping much intuitive experience into this category. Extrasensory includes the range of vibrations that we either can't usually perceive or don't out of habit. The gut is starting to be more widely recognized as a center of awareness in its own right, too, an organ of intelligence like the brain. Of course, some cultures and wisdom traditions have known about the gut as an organ of perception and intelligence for a long time. Gut feelings are a common, recognizable form of intuitive experience, which we can consider to be an activation of nerves. This is an instinctual connection, alerting us to danger or just the need to pay attention. Information that occurs on subtle, energetic, etheric levels is not usually sensed in the ordinary meaning of that word. Instead, as Jung noted, intuition may announce its presence through any or none of the senses. We call these manifestations tells. As we learned before, a tell is not the intuitive experience itself, but a personal signal that draws your attention toward an intuitive experience. The key is to learn your personal tells so you know when something has meaning as intuitive experience or not. We can cooperate by first registering that there's something to notice, then let the context relay information through the vibrosphere and respond accordingly. Often we ignore those tells and only recognize in hindsight that something was meaningful. So that's what that was about, if we're lucky. Or more common, I should have listened. What we consider sensory or sensible is culturally conditioned. I don't know about you, but I grew up knowing unquestioningly that humans have five senses. And I learned that these senses are simply how we experience the world. Nothing to question here. With intuitive sensing, there's no limit to the ways we might perceive it. If you're looking for a specific generic tell, you might miss your hits. As part of this work, you're encouraged to play and experiment. What does your intuition feel like? Do you get a gut feeling? Do you notice tension? Does your breathing change? Is there constriction in your throat? Does your body tingle, shiver, or flush? What are your tells? To identify this, our rational linear orientation may need to be gently tucked away at first so that intuitive awareness can arise away from the stern eye of the censoring mind. And remember, intuition is a process, a mode or way. Once we learn what it feels like, there's no need to point to it from the outside. With practice, we can start to lessen the need for asking, wait, was that intuition? Or was that just fear, anxiety, wishful thinking, etc., etc., etc.? Energy body. I know about the energy body firsthand from my Reiki practice, where we learn to intentionally cultivate the sensation of vibrations at the heart and other energy centers. We do this because we know, through inherited wisdom and experience, that energy is stored and moves through those areas of the body. Reiki and other mind body healing traditions have mapped and developed an understanding of the energy or etheric body and harness that knowledge for healing. I refer to Reiki because it's a system I know, but there are lots of other practices and modalities that cultivate ki or chi. This concept of energy and how it works through the body seems crucial to understanding how some intuitive experiences take place. Because the concept of chi is so different from the Judeo Christian understanding of energy and aliveness, it can be tempting to dismiss the existence of a universal life force energy and to reason away experience of it, scientism at work. This energetic body becomes coherent through practice. The process gets described as smoothing the aura, i.e., field of energy, getting rid of sticky spots or even gaping holes, those places where pain or trauma have left us with energetic scar tissue. These are places where healthy boundaries are not yet in place. P.S. These are metaphors, but what they describe are also very, very real. Yoga is another example of making the energy body coherent through practice. Asana, posture practice, is a preparatory practice not done just for body sculpting, but for the purpose of enabling a deeper connection with the subtle energies of life. Yoga means union, and the union envisioned was and is a conscious connection to the underlying foundational energetic consciousness that is the source and ground of all, both seen and unseen. When the energetic body is coherent and energy is flowing well, i.e., it's neither stagnant nor in overdrive, we are more likely to experience the right amount of receptivity to perceive intuitive information. Just as we practice meditation to observe the flow of attention, energy work helps us refocus our attention so that we might notice non-material reality just as well. Practices that support the subtle or energy body and that help enhance intuition can include engaging with intentional energy practice through any movement like yoga, Reiki, Tai Chi, or Qigong, meditation, and visualization. Even a simple thing like sitting up straight will enhance energetic flow through the subtle body. A straight spine lets spinal fluid, blood, and energy flow more freely through the body and to and from the brain. Try it now. Don't you feel more alert and vibrant? Boundaries and perception. Intuitive experience does not rely on being excessively open and receptive. Receptive awareness depends on boundaries. This might seem contradictory, but because there is only so much we can take in as input, much of our sensory attention is limited or constrained to what is most necessary for survival in our complex, crowded world. When we establish more clearly defined boundaries around our attention, we can be more deliberate about the kind of information that gets into our conscious awareness. We can be intentional about awareness. Let's think about how boundaries help us focus attention so that we perceive more of what we want to and less of the clutter that we need not pay attention to. Consciousness itself is a process of filtering and ordering too much information into coherent form so that we can make sense of what we experience. This has a dual function, allowing us to perceive in the first place, but also of limiting what we can perceive. For example, the way we limit our attention to the realm of objects, the seen world, is a result of educating ourselves to perceive, to filter that way. After all, to notice is to select, which raises the question of what we choose to notice. Maybe more importantly here, what governs what we choose to notice? And do we trust this part of ourselves? These choices are most often culturally conditioned. We need to become aware of our current existent boundaries. What do we let ourselves notice, see, and know? Here's a trivial example of how everyday consciousness acts as a filter and how easy it can sometimes be to change the filter. Several years ago, the eye doctor said I needed to wear glasses. I started the process of evaluating my prescription and shopping for frames. Suddenly, or so it seemed, I noticed how many of my friends and family wear glasses, and strangers on the street and in restaurants. It seemed that overnight, everyone was now wearing glasses. Of course, the appearance of this seemingly overnight phenomenon across the entire population was caused entirely by my awareness. Now that eyeglasses were on my mind, my consciousness was filtering for them, whereas before it was likely filtering other people's eyeglasses out. This is similar to how my relationship with intuition tends to intensify when I'm thinking about it. It has to do with how our attention works, amplifying and highlighting what's already there, and it illustrates how mindset functions and why it matters. When we're paying attention to intuition, it shows up more. As part of developing energetic coherence, boundaries help us fashion a container in which we can flow and respond in the ways we want. We decide what gets through. We determine how much output, how much input, and what kinds we will accept. This helps us conserve and direct our most precious but limited resource, our energy, which is the conduit of our consciousness. These days, we usually hear about boundaries as something we don't have enough of. We lack boundaries in terms of how we choose to direct our energy and spend our time. We're often expending energy where it isn't deserved or where we don't get it back to the degree we give it out. But cultivating intuitive awareness does involve a certain amount of permeability. It also requires us to strengthen boundaries where they matter, in keeping ourselves well and in maintaining our integrity. Some of us do need to focus on relaxing our energetic boundaries, allowing more into awareness. As the science tells us, we're made up more of energy than matter, and we are inter and intra-connected individuals. This way of understanding ourselves in relation to the world helps us to decenter the egoic individual self and lets us settle into becoming more comfortable and more connected to the context of our world and our relations. If we can learn to work with this interconnection, it becomes increasingly possible to perceive energy and energetic potential, like events that haven't happened yet. But some might need tighter boundaries. Highly sensitive people often suffer from allowing too much into their sphere of awareness, consciously or unconsciously. If you identify as highly sensitive, you may benefit from learning how to become less open when you want to rest, and from learning discernment practices that help you know which energies are which are personal, which are collective, which can and should be left alone. You can set boundaries with visualization, with your intention, by keeping your energy body in good shape, or simply even by spending restorative time alone. Meditation. When intuitive experience is unfamiliar, we need to practice using it, making it work, and familiarizing our whole mind body system with what it sounds like, looks like, and feels like. Because attention is typically so focused outward, meditation, introspection, and fine tuning our sensitivity are key. Meditation is the most commonly recommended practice for stabilizing the development of intuition. You might say it's a fundamental prerequisite. The value of meditation lies in how it creates a receptive psychic environment. It cleans the slate, opens space, declutters. In fact, it's so effective that simply just taking up a regular meditation practice facilitates intuition development, whether or not cultivating intuition is an intended outcome. I'm definitely more consciously intuitive when I've been doing my meditation practice more diligently. It's no coincidence that those who practice meditation or other contemplative practices are more comfortable in non discursive realms. Wisdom traditions accept intuitive experience as a matter of fact and as a valued mode of knowledge production. Hinduism, Buddhism, and other transpersonal lineages value, study, and seek out the inner realms of the psyche and the non discursive experiences available therein. There is a dedicated interest about these inner realms as sources of knowledge, and practices honed over thousands of years help individuals access them. This has meant that lived subjective experience, including non ordinary experiences of consciousness, have been valued as an aspect of spiritual development rather than pathologized, as our Western culture tends to do. Meanwhile, much of Western psychology has focused on studying behavior and its observable material causes. In general, Eurocentric psychology tends to pathologize the psyche and its extraordinary anomalies, leading us to avoid and even fear our own depths and innate abilities. We know that this has limited the possibilities for us to explore psychic experience unless it fits within the narrow range of acceptable. It has also left us without the skills and practices for inner exploration that help us get in there and know what is real within. Paying attention to non discursive experience is a skill we cultivate through meditation and other mind body practices, where we employ a direct focus on something like the breath to stabilize our focus and quieten the constant stream of thoughts, ideas, and concepts we're used to focusing on and that usually take up space in the mind. What emerges from regular time with a quieted mind is enhanced intuitive access. The spontaneity and suddenness of intuitive insight means that intuition has not necessarily passed through the usual filters of thought. Through meditation practice, we begin loosening the filters, and the state that results from a quieted mind becomes a way to enhance intuitive access. Within that quiet, we can start to discern the various voices, messages, drives, and impulses that contribute to our conscious awareness. We become aware of awareness. Centering during meditation. Centering is simply the act of placing ourselves in a position with nothing else to do but sit quietly and turn our attention inward, allowing the mind to defocus. It's a process of drawing within to whatever you are experiencing at the time. The experience of centering or coming to center is typically very relaxing. A kind of ease settles in, which is often accompanied by a plethora of pleasant sensations in the body and psyche. We tend to sit more upright, and we start to notice more, inward and or outward. When we first get quiet, an array of thoughts and feelings are likely to arise. It's important to avoid identifying these, lest we try to censor or control them. Instead, we aim to develop the stance of a neutral inner witness by quieting or distracting the mind through watching or counting breaths, visualizing an image, or simply gazing at a candle flame. A part of the mind is occupied by this focused attention, and usually at the same time, thoughts come in. For the duration of the meditation, we acknowledge these but don't focus on them. The goal is to continually return the attention inward to the sensation of breathing or whatever the chosen focus, and observe all the things taking place. Inner witness. Meditation supports an inner relationship of observation or witnessing. The term inner witness refers to the part of yourself that acts as an observer to the contents of the mind, thoughts, feelings, desires, etc. The inner witness is an aspect of the mind that observes the mind with some detachment from outcome. It can be a calm, unfazed, non-judgmental presence in the midst of a thought storm or emotional turmoil, or let's be honest, just a regular day in the life of a postmodern mind. In meditation, we practice being the witness by watching thoughts come and go while also maintaining focus on the meditative process. This allows for an interesting, albeit advanced, experience of selfness. When you're able to watch yourself, it becomes possible to realize that what you are is more than you might have thought. What you thought you were opens up and creates a new expanded context for knowledge production. Eventually, you recognize that you are not the thinker. How can you be if you are also able to watch the thoughts? With practice, we become increasingly comfortable identifying more as the watcher of thoughts, the witness, than with the thoughts themselves, giving rise to an expanded perspective. Inner censor. The sibling of the witness self is the inner censor. The censor is an internalized voice of doubt, educated by scientism, patriarchy, colonial capitalism, religion, and other ideologies that seek to deny the power of liberated consciousness. Its job is to try to keep us safe, but it frequently overreaches. A primary effect of the censor is that it might not allow psychic experience to bubble up into awareness, so it stays at the level of affect or in the body, and the intuitive experience seems to lack content. In that way, the inner censor can hold us hostage, becoming a cause of stress or, over time, injury. Buddhist practitioners speak of beginner's mind. This is a useful understanding that entails remaining receptive and curious, surrendering the expectation of mastery, and registering that practice is a permanent condition. It's about being patient, allowing uncertainty, allowing not knowing. Receptive awareness is alert yet relaxed, curious but not striving, and meditation helps entrain the mind to be in this receptive state more often. Through our meditation practice, we can transform our relationship to thought and judgment. We get to be aware without thinking. Most simply, the key to any intuition development practice is a quality of surrender. We learn to become responsive rather than reactive. We find that there is a space between our thoughts, and with practice, we can enlarge and elongate those spaces. Meditation helps us learn to allow the inner censor to rest. We learn to rest in that space, uncertain though it is. A caution about bypassing. Before I carry on, I feel a need to say that it's important that the relaxed, receptive attention of the intuitive stance is not a mindless one, it's mindful. There is potential for great depth in this work, so be careful to take up a meditation practice that allows the work to touch the soul in a transformative way. This is not about love and light or the power of positivity. It's not about intent at all. Undertaking a practice that includes ideas and expectations can interfere with perceiving what is. It's much more about becoming a filter and adjusting the spectrum of receptive awareness that filters what's really there. And here I need to add a caveat about mindfulness practice and what gets called spiritual practice more broadly. Mindfulness has become a bit of a catch all phrase, often introduced as an intervention for stress reduction or for improving behavior in schools or productivity in the workplace. In its popular forms, mindfulness practice sometimes stays at a surface level, enabling spiritual bypassing. While stress reduction and alleviating anxiety are important wellness goals, we should absolutely be incorporating them into our healthcare and education. In the wisdom traditions where it arose, mindfulness is a practice of gaining deep self awareness and connection to the unseen. When taken up this way as a spiritual practice, it can be messy, profound, transformative work that brings a deeper connection to your life because you're attending to the psyche and its depths. Deepening the breath is great and can create much needed relaxation. Paying attention to the experiences in the body during breathing practices, mindful movement, yoga, martial arts, and other forms of exercises, dance, and play can light up the intuitive sensory dimension and will increase awareness of all kinds of other feelings and sensations in and through the body, signaling information we can use to be and stay well. But having relaxation as the goal of mindful practice encourages us to glide over the stressors that created the tension in the first place. There are root causes that need to be addressed. In these cases, inner work can be glossed over in favor of a pleasant outcome or result. This is another reminder to get a mentor, teacher, or therapist to support you in cultivating your inner senses. Spiritual practice is hard work. As we open up to see more of what is there, what arises is more light, sure, but also the awareness of more shadow. Psychic awareness is not necessarily nice or pleasant. We will know things we would normally not choose to know, things that a less committed awareness might overlook. It takes both maturity and self awareness to be receptive and secure enough to be willing to experience intuitive awareness. Opening up into a dynamic mode of receptive awareness is vulnerable, and it's a commitment we don't always have to make. We get to put up boundaries around our intuitive connection. We can develop agency to drop in and out.